sort of the next question I remember asking myself was, if in my viewing of films, I'm watching portrayals of people who look like me, and that many times I find to be like reductive or just like untrue, who are the people who is making that? And that was the first time it really dawned on me on like, oh wow, there's a whole industry behind this thing.
Mm,
And also there's not enough. Actually, at the time, I don't think I realized like there's not enough of people who look like us making things about people like us. But it was the first sort of moment of like, oh, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to grow up in Canada and portrayals of like blackness and womanness and girlhood, that story being told by someone who's never had my experience? How did that shape who I am and sort of
mm,
the anxieties and insecurities that I feel, and what can I do to participate in changing that narrative? That was the first time I asked myself that question. And honestly, it scared me because I didn't know anybody who made films and I didn't even know what it meant to like make a film. So, and I had grown up in a family with like so many people in my family are teachers and nurses, and my sister's a lawyer. So I just sort of didn't know what to do with those questions and sort of tried to bury them for a long time because it overwhelmed me.
mm, mm. That's powerful. It reminds me actually of when I was in college. I did engineering, but I always had like one writing class that I would take. There was a humanities requirement, right? It was built into curriculum that you had to take, and most engineering students hated having to do that, but I loved it because I've always been
Yes.
into storytelling.
Yes.
And I guess in those moments, I always kind of back in those college days when I wrote, I thought about how back in Ghana and maybe largely on the African continent, there's this like push for development. And the first thought is to invest in obviously science, engineering, doctors, because we need to build that infrastructure, right? And that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been prioritizing for so long. But story is so underinvested on some level. And I wondered if that was slowing our ability to sort of self-reflect as a society. Where have we been? Who are we now? Where are we going? Right. And like that story has that potential to allow us to look at what we're doing more critically. And I wondered if we poured some of those scarce resources that we have into story, if it might accelerate quote unquote development as a whole.